What if I told you Star Wars did not just change Hollywood, it created an entire galaxy of shameless copycats? After 1977, filmmakers everywhere suddenly discovered laser battles, evil space rulers, mysterious heroes, robots, princesses, and suspiciously familiar spaceships. Some had real money. Others looked as if they were built in somebody's garage, and a few copied Star Wars so boldly that it is amazing they even existed. Here are 20 forgotten 80s examples. Before we enter this bargain bin galaxy, hit the like button, share this video with another retro movie fan, and subscribe to the channel. Number 20. Battle for the Lost Planet, 1986. Sometimes a movie does not need a giant budget to reach for the stars. It only needs a miniature spaceship, some homemade effects, and absolutely no fear of looking cheap. That philosophy describes Battle for the Lost Planet almost perfectly. The story follows industrial spy Harry Trent, who steals important information and escapes by hijacking an experimental spacecraft. Unfortunately, the controls malfunction, sending him helplessly away from Earth. While trapped above the planet, Harry watches an alien force attack humanity. By the time he finally returns, years have passed and Earth has become a ruined battleground. From there, the movie becomes a strange mixture of space adventure and post-apocalyptic survival. One of its most memorable ideas is simply Harry watching the disaster unfold while unable to do anything. Instead of immediately becoming a heroic space pilot like Luke Skywalker, he is basically a stranded observer who knows something terrible is happening below. When he finally returns, he discovers that the information he stole may actually contain humanity's best chance against the invaders. The effects are extremely modest, but that is part of its strange VHS charm. It feels like someone saw the space battles made fashionable by Star Wars and decided that a few models, explosions, and enormous ambition would be enough. Today, hardly anyone remembers it. But that makes it exactly the kind of forgotten 80s science fiction oddity this list was made for. Number 19. Robot Holocaust, 1987. Imagine the Rebel Alliance losing almost everything, and then being forced to fight its way through a world that looks like an abandoned warehouse. That gets surprisingly close to Robot Holocaust. Civilization has nearly collapsed after machines turned against humanity. The remaining people either wander through the wasteland or live under the power of a mysterious ruler known as the Dark One. Human workers are forced to keep the surviving city running, while fighters are sent into staged contests for entertainment. Into this mess walks Neo, a wandering hero who eventually joins a small group trying to rescue a scientist whose knowledge could weaken the Dark One. Yes, the hero is actually called Neo, years before The Matrix made the name famous. The movie gives him companions, robots, strange warriors, an evil ruler, underground resistance figures, and a dangerous journey toward the enemy's headquarters. That structure should sound familiar. The unforgettable scenes are not unforgettable because the production looks expensive. They are unforgettable because almost nothing looks expensive. The sets appear enormous in the characters' dialogue and surprisingly small on screen. Yet the actors behave as though they are standing inside the center of a massive futuristic empire. That commitment gives Robot Holocaust its charm. It is less Star Wars and more, what if the rebellion had a weekend, several costumes, and a nearly empty industrial building? And somehow, that makes it worth remembering. If forgotten VHS science fiction is your thing, subscribe now, because the movies get much stranger from here. And share this video with someone who thinks they have already seen every 80s space adventure. Number 18. Star Knight, 1985. At first, this looks like a medieval fantasy. Then the dragon arrives. Star Knight, also released under alternative titles, takes place in medieval Europe, where terrified villagers believe a mysterious creature has appeared in the sky. But the supposed dragon is not really a magical beast at all. It is a spacecraft, and the mysterious knight connected to it is actually a visitor from another world. That simple idea turns the movie into one of the strangest science fantasy combinations of the decade. Princess Alba becomes fascinated by the visitor, while the people around her try to understand technology using the only language they know: magic, monsters, knights, and legends. The famous visual joke is seeing medieval characters react to a spacecraft as though they have witnessed an actual dragon descending from the heavens. There are castles, swords, armor, glowing technology, and Klaus Kinski wandering through the story as if all of this is completely normal. That mixture became very fashionable after Star Wars proved audiences would accept fantasy storytelling inside science fiction worlds. The movie is not a direct recreation of Luke Skywalker's adventure. Instead, it belongs to that post-Star Wars period when filmmakers realized they could throw knights, spaceships, mysterious technology, princesses, and fantasy imagery into the same movie. The result feels like two films accidentally collided. And because almost nobody talks about Star Knight anymore, discovering it today feels like finding a forgotten VHS tape from an alternate 1980s. Number 17. Hercules, 1983. Greek mythology should be safe from Star Wars, right? Apparently not. Director Luigi Cozzi had already made the infamous 1978 space adventure Star Crash, and his 1983 version of Hercules again refuses to keep fantasy and science fiction separated. Lou Ferrigno plays the legendary strongman, but instead of remaining in the familiar world of swords, temples, and ancient gods, the movie pushes mythology toward cosmic fantasy. Even Mount Olympus is presented with a strange science fiction flavor. The film begins by showing us very quickly that normal physics will not be respected. One of its most famous moments involves Hercules battling a bear and throwing it so impossibly far that the sequence became legendary among fans of bizarre cinema. The film then keeps escalating with mechanical creatures, glowing effects, exaggerated villains, cosmic machinery, and imagery that looks closer to a low-budget space opera than a traditional mythology movie. That is what makes it fascinating. After Star Wars, producers understood that audiences wanted spectacle. So suddenly even Hercules could exist in a universe filled with futuristic machines and cosmic forces. Ferrigno plays everything completely straight, which makes the movie even more entertaining. He does not appear confused by robotic monsters. He does not question the science fiction machinery. He simply remains Hercules. The result is a film that feels as though someone mixed an ancient Greek adventure, a Saturday morning cartoon, and leftover ideas from an Italian Star Wars imitation. It should not work. Yet you probably will not forget it. Number 16. Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity, 1987. This one takes a much older story and sends it directly into the bargain bin future. Two prisoners named Daria and Tisa escape from a space facility and flee aboard a small craft. Their escape goes wrong, forcing them to land on a strange planet where they meet the mysterious Zed. At first, Zed appears willing to help them. Then they discover that surviving his world is far more complicated. The movie essentially relocates the classic The Most Dangerous Game idea to another planet, surrounding it with robots, spaceships, futuristic weapons, strange creatures, and the kind of inexpensive production design that defined late-night 1980s science fiction. Its most memorable sequences involve Daria and Tisa exploring Zed's fortress while gradually realizing that their host is not the friendly rescuer he first appears to be. Two robots patrol the property, giving even quiet scenes that unmistakable 80s space adventure atmosphere. This is where the Star Wars connection becomes more visual than narrative. The movie borrows the language that audiences had come to expect from low-budget space adventures: laser weapons, escape craft, robots, alien landscapes, practical creatures, and heroes running through futuristic corridors. But underneath that shiny science fiction coating is an adventure story that had existed for decades. That was a common trick during the post-Star Wars rush. Take an old story, add spaceships, add robots, move it to another planet, and suddenly you have something that looks new enough to place on a VHS cover. Number 15, Star Slammer, 1986. Few titles scream 1980s video store louder than Star Slammer. The story begins with Tara, an independent miner, living on the planet Eros. After standing up against Captain Bantor and his forces, she is arrested and sentenced to imprisonment aboard a giant prison spacecraft called the Vehemence. That is where the movie really begins. Instead of joining heroic rebels or searching for a mystical power, Tara must survive life aboard a floating prison, ruled by a brutal warden while Bantor continues causing trouble. The setting allows director Fred Olen Ray to combine two inexpensive movie formulas: the prison escape story and the space opera. Suddenly, prison corridors become spaceship corridors, guards become futuristic soldiers, ordinary escape scenes get laser weapons and space battles. The film even throws strange creatures, robots, alien characters, mind control technology, and miniature spacecraft into the mix. One memorable sequence comes when the story finally delivers the obligatory laser-filled space action, despite most of the movie taking place inside confined sets. The production seems determined to remind viewers that yes, this is absolutely happening in space. The influence of the post-Star Wars market is impossible to miss. This was an era when putting "Star" in your title could immediately suggest adventure. Star Slammer never had the resources to compete with Lucasfilm. It barely tries. Instead, it takes the visual language audiences already recognized and uses it to decorate a completely different B-movie formula. That shameless efficiency is exactly why it still has cult appeal. Number 14. Arena, 1989. What if the Mos Eisley Cantina stopped serving drinks and started hosting boxing matches? That is basically the wonderful madness of Arena. Steve Armstrong is a human living aboard an enormous space station filled with creatures from across the galaxy. He is not a Jedi, military pilot, or chosen hero. He works in a diner, but after demonstrating that he can handle himself during a confrontation, Steve is pulled into the station's competitive fighting circuit, where humans and bizarre alien creatures battle inside an arena. Soon, the ordinary cook becomes an unlikely sports star. The plot is essentially Rocky transported into the kind of crowded intergalactic environment popularized by Star Wars. And that is exactly why it works. Instead of copying Death Stars or lightsabers, the movie copies something more important: the idea that the galaxy should feel busy. Every corner contains another species. Every bar contains another strange face. The station feels as though an entire universe exists just beyond the camera. The movie's standout moments are naturally the arena fights. Steve faces opponents that look nothing like human boxers, including elaborate practical creatures and mechanical hybrids. Those monster effects give the film far more personality than its limited reputation suggests. The Guardian later compared the station's population of creatures to the weirdness of the Mos Eisley Cantina, while Polygon described the concept as essentially Star Wars meeting Rocky, and that may be the perfect description. It is a familiar underdog sports movie. It just happens to take place somewhere Han Solo might stop for lunch. Number 13. Yor, The Hunter from the Future, 1983. For the first half, you may wonder why this movie is even on a Star Wars list. Be patient. Yor begins as a blonde barbarian running through what appears to be a prehistoric world. He battles primitive warriors, encounters dinosaurs, rescues Kala, and even uses a giant dead bat as an improvised glider during one of the movie's most wonderfully unbelievable action sequences. It looks like a cheap Conan imitator. Then the movie changes. Slowly, Yor discovers that his primitive world is connected to a technologically advanced past. Eventually, he reaches an island ruled by the Overlord, a futuristic dictator commanding android soldiers and advanced weapons. Suddenly, the loincloth adventure becomes a laser battle. Rebels appear. Android troops fire futuristic weapons. A powerful ruler sits inside a technological fortress. Spaceships enter the story. By the final act, it feels as though somebody changed channels from sword and sorcery fantasy to discount Star Wars without warning. That transformation is precisely what makes Yor special. The movie arrived during a period when filmmakers were throwing successful genres into a blender. Barbarian movies were popular. Star Wars was popular. Why choose? Reb Brown charges through the film with such enormous enthusiasm that even the strangest moments become strangely lovable. The climactic attack on the Overlord's headquarters is the closest the movie comes to full space opera, with the rebels trying to destroy his technological power while Yor confronts the ruler directly. It begins in prehistory. It ends with spaceships. Only the 1980s could have made that journey seem reasonable. Number 12. Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin, 1983. The title promises an enormous galactic war. The movie delivers a desert, some vehicles, mystical crystals, and one extremely determined hero. But somehow, that is enough. Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin follows Dogen, a heroic wanderer pursuing the mysterious Jared Sin across a distant desert world. Sin uses magical-looking crystals to manipulate people and expand his power, while his half-cyborg son Baal becomes one of Dogen's most dangerous enemies. Soon Dogen joins forces with other characters, searches for a powerful ancient mask, battles nomads, and races across a wasteland filled with strange technology. Essentially, it is a Western wearing space opera clothing, and that is where the Star Wars influence becomes obvious. George Lucas had already proven that Western gunfighters, mystical warriors, ancient powers, futuristic vehicles, and science fiction could exist together. Metal Storm takes that same freedom and pushes it toward 80s fantasy. One of the film's best remembered confrontations involves Baal's mechanical arm. The villain can attack Dogen with a strange substance that sends him into a nightmare-like state, blurring technology and magic. Later, Dogen must use the ancient mask to challenge Scene's crystal power. The movie was also filmed in 3D, which means objects regularly seem designed to fly directly toward the audience. Its biggest frustration is that the title promises the destruction of Jared Sin, yet the story leaves things more open than you might expect. A sequel never became the giant franchise the filmmakers were clearly imagining, but perhaps that makes it even more perfect. It is the remains of an 80s space saga that never truly began. Number 11. Space Hunter. Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, 1983. Peter Strauss plays Wolf, a space adventurer who hears about a valuable rescue mission. 3 survivors have crash-landed on the dangerous planet Terra-11, and whoever brings them back can claim a huge reward. That is enough motivation for Wolf. He heads down to the planet and finds something very different from the polished future he left behind. Terra-11 is a wasteland filled with raiders, strange vehicles, mutated inhabitants, hostile groups, and a powerful cyborg ruler called Overdog. Along the way, Wolf also meets the street-smart Nikki, played by a young Molly Ringwald. Wolf is basically the 80s B-movie answer to the reluctant space rogue. He wants the reward. He does not want responsibility. Naturally, responsibility finds him anyway. The movie combines Han Solo-style space adventure with the dusty road warrior atmosphere that became popular during the same period. Its most memorable section comes inside Overdog's fortress. Prisoners are forced through a dangerous obstacle course, while the enormous mechanical villain watches from his strange technological throne. Michael Ironside makes Overdog far more intimidating than the movie's colorful title might suggest. Wolf eventually enters the fortress to rescue Nikki and the missing survivors, leading to a showdown involving Overdog's huge mechanical claws and the machinery keeping him alive. Released during the 1983 3D boom, the movie was clearly designed as an event. Today, however, it is strangely forgotten. And that is unfortunate, because if you ever wanted Star Wars, Mad Max, and an amusement park ride trapped inside the same movie, Space Hunter is waiting. Number 10. Escape from Galaxy 3, 1981. Now we enter the territory where the word inspired starts feeling extremely generous. An evil galactic ruler threatens Princess Belle's star and her companion Lithan, forcing them to escape while danger spreads across their region of space. There are rulers, there are princesses, there are spacecraft, there are cosmic battles, and there is a very strong feeling that someone had recently seen another successful movie about rebels fighting an empire. Escape from Galaxy 3 was an Italian science fiction production released in 1981 and has also circulated under titles connecting it to Star Crash. Even more revealing, the movie reused miniature and effects footage from Star Crash, which had itself been one of the most famous European attempts to ride the original Star Wars wave. So this movie is almost a copy of a copy. That is impressive. Princess Belle's star and Lithan escape the evil Oriclon and eventually arrive on a comparatively primitive planet. There, the story suddenly becomes more interested in how these advanced visitors interact with people who live very differently from them. The result is not non-stop space warfare. Instead, it becomes an odd mixture of space opera, romantic fantasy, and European exploitation cinema. Its recognizable spacecraft footage is probably the movie's most famous feature, because viewers familiar with Star Crash may experience a strange feeling of déjà vu, and they should. They have literally seen some of it before. If Star Wars created an industry of imitators, Escape from Galaxy 3 proves that eventually even the imitators started recycling one another. Number 9. Galaxina, 1980. Not every movie wanted to defeat Star Wars. Some simply wanted to make fun of it. Galaxina stars Dorothy Stratton as an advanced android serving aboard an intergalactic police cruiser. Around her is a crew that behaves far less professionally than the heroes of most major space adventures. When the ship is assigned to retrieve a mysterious object called the Blue Star, the mission sends everyone deeper into a universe built from familiar science fiction cliches. The movie openly plays with ideas from Star Wars, Star Trek, Alien, and older westerns. So technically, calling it a pure ripoff would be unfair. It knows exactly what it is doing. That is why it deserves a place here. After serious space operas became huge business, Galaxina treated those conventions like comedy props. The film includes bizarre aliens, space police, robots, long journeys, futuristic bars, mysterious objects, and characters who look as though they wandered out of several completely different franchises. One of its most amusing sequences comes when the crew reaches a Western-style settlement on another world. The joke is obvious. Space adventure has become so flexible that filmmakers can basically place cowboys anywhere. Galaxina herself also changes during the journey. Originally presented as a highly controlled machine, she gradually develops more human emotions and becomes romantically interested in pilot Thor. That gives the movie a surprisingly sweet center beneath all the jokes. The production remains cheap. The comedy is extremely 1980. But there is something charming about watching a movie parody space opera cliches while those cliches were still relatively new. Number 8. Krull, 1983. Here is what happens when a studio looks at Star Wars and says, "Fine, but what if Luke Skywalker had a magical throwing blade?" Krull begins on a fantasy planet being invaded by the Beast, a powerful alien entity whose forces arrive inside the Black Fortress, a gigantic structure that is part castle, part mountain, and part spacecraft. Prince Colwyn is preparing to marry Princess Lissa when the Beast's soldiers attack. The ceremony is destroyed. Lissa is captured. Colwyn survives and begins assembling a group of companions to rescue her. Sound familiar? There is a young hero, a princess, a fellowship of unlikely companions, a mysterious older guide, an evil ruler, strange creatures, a super weapon-like fortress, and a magical object called the glaive. Yet Krull is much stranger than simply fantasy Star Wars. Its world contains cyclopes, shapeshifters, giant spiders, magical horses, medieval weapons, futuristic invaders, and one villain who seems to have arrived from a completely different genre. The scene everyone remembers is Colwyn retrieving the glaive from a dangerous mountain chamber. The five-bladed weapon immediately became the movie's signature image. Later, the heroes ride impossibly fast fire mares toward the Black Fortress before it changes location again. The final battle takes place inside that alien fortress, where Colwyn confronts the Beast and discovers the glaive is not ultimately the power that saves him. With a reported budget far above most movies on this list, Krull was not some tiny garage production. It was a serious attempt at building another grand fantasy universe. Instead, it became one of the 80s most beautiful cinematic misfits. Number 7. Masters of the Universe, 1987. Even Canon Films reportedly promoted this as a possible Star Wars of the 1980s. That sentence alone earns it a place here. Dolph Lundgren plays He-Man, Defender of Eternia, while Frank Langella plays Skeletor, with enough seriousness to convince you Shakespeare might be performed at Castle Grayskull. Skeletor captures Grayskull and plans to take control of its enormous power. He-Man, Teela, Man-at-Arms, and Gwildor attempt to stop him, but a device known as the Cosmic Key accidentally transports the heroes to Earth. That was partly a budget-saving decision, creatively disguised as plot. Instead of spending the entire movie constructing the world of Eternia, the characters run around contemporary California. Yet, whenever Skeletor's soldiers appear, the Star Wars comparisons become hard to ignore. Black armored troops march through portals. Laser weapons fill the screen. There is a resistance fighting a dark ruler. Our hero carries an iconic sword. Skeletor sits on a grand throne surrounded by machinery and soldiers. Even contemporary criticism described the movie as a Conan and Star Wars hybrid. The most memorable sequence comes when Skeletor finally transforms himself into a golden, godlike ruler inside Castle Grayskull. He-Man is brought before him, apparently defeated. Then the hero recovers his sword, delivers the expected declaration of power, and the final duel begins. It is ridiculous. It is magnificent. And Langella acts as though the future of civilization actually depends on the outcome. The movie failed to launch the franchise Canon hoped for, despite teasing Skeletor's return after the credits. Instead, it became a cult object. Nearly 40 years later, its mixture of toy mythology and bargain-price space opera may be more entertaining than ever. Number 6. The Ice Pirates, 1984. Water is the most valuable substance in the galaxy. Naturally, that means somebody is going to steal it. Welcome to the Ice Pirates. In this future, most water has disappeared, giving an organization known as the Templars enormous control over civilization. Jason and his crew survive by raiding shipments of frozen water. Yes, they are literally pirates who steal ice. After one mission goes wrong, Jason becomes involved with Princess Karina, who is searching for her missing father and possibly a legendary planet containing huge amounts of water. On paper, the influences are obvious. You have a charming space rogue, a princess, an oppressive organization, robot companions, laser battles, strange planets, dangerous bars, a quest across the galaxy. But unlike many movies on this list, the Ice Pirates understands how familiar everything feels and turns that familiarity into comedy. The movie keeps getting stranger as it goes. Robots complain, characters encounter bizarre creatures, space battles become punchlines. Then the finale completely loses its mind. The heroes enter a time warp where time begins accelerating rapidly. During the chaotic confrontation, characters age at different speeds while fighting, turning what should be an ordinary space action climax into one of the strangest sequences in 80s science fiction. That time warp battle is the scene many fans remember decades later. Everyone becomes older, events move faster, and the movie behaves as though this is a perfectly reasonable way to end a space adventure. Ice Pirates may have started as another post-Star Wars space comedy, but it develops an identity so weird that eventually comparisons stop mattering. Number 5. Space Raiders, 1983. Roger Corman understood one rule better than almost anyone in Hollywood: never waste an expensive spaceship. After producing Battle Beyond the Stars, Corman returned to space with Space Raiders, a movie that reused sets, effects material, and even portions of James Horner's music from the earlier production. The story follows a young boy named Peter, who accidentally hides aboard a spacecraft being stolen by a group of pirates. Their leader, Hawk, discovers the unexpected passenger and reluctantly agrees to help return him home. That gives the movie an amusing variation on the familiar Star Wars formula. Instead of a young farm boy leaving home to become a galactic hero, Peter accidentally joins a group of space outlaws. Hawk becomes a rough Han Solo-style protector, who initially views the boy as a problem, before developing genuine concern for him. The crew visits strange stations. They encounter bounty hunters. They deal with criminal figures. Spacecraft exchange laser fire, and a powerful automated company vessel begins tracking Peter. One particularly memorable stretch occurs when Hawk teaches the boy how to operate the ship's weapons by using asteroids as targets. It is exactly the kind of childhood space fantasy these movies were selling. The adventure eventually becomes more emotional than its cheap title suggests, as Hawk's crew faces increasingly serious consequences while trying to keep Peter alive. What makes the movie historically amusing is how aggressively Corman recycled his own material. Ships from Battle Beyond the Stars fly again. Sets return wearing minor changes. Music comes back. Even critics at the time noticed the resemblance, with one calling the film a small-scale Star Wars imitation. Corman did not merely imitate Hollywood. He learned how to imitate himself. Number 4. Star Chaser, The Legend of Orin, 1985. If lawyers could watch animated movies with facial expressions, they might have raised an eyebrow at this one. Star Chaser, The Legend of Orin, opens deep underground, where human workers spend their lives mining crystals under the control of a mysterious authority. Orin, a young worker who knows little about the universe beyond the mines, discovers a sword-like weapon and eventually escapes to learn the truth about his world. From there, he encounters a roguish space smuggler, robots, strange worlds, rebels, and an evil ruler named Zygon. You can probably see where this is going. Orin is visually and narratively close to the classic innocent young space hero. His weapon produces an energy blade. The villain hides behind intimidating mechanical imagery. A cynical pilot becomes his ally. Robotic characters provide assistance and comedy. There is an oppressed population waiting for liberation. Even modern retrospectives routinely place the movie among the clearest animated Star Wars imitators. But Star Chaser deserves more credit than simply being called a copy. The animation is ambitious. The world is surprisingly dark. And the film was released theatrically in 3D, giving its spacecraft and action sequences an unusual visual style. The most memorable early scene is Orin discovering the hilt of the mysterious sword. To him, it represents freedom. To anyone who has watched Star Wars, it represents something else entirely. Later, Orin learns that the weapon's real power is more complicated than the glowing blade suggests, allowing the story to develop its own mythology. The result feels like somebody traced the outline of Star Wars and then started adding increasingly strange ideas inside it. Number 3. The Last Starfighter, 1984. This is where the word rip-off becomes controversial, because The Last Starfighter is actually good. Alex Rogan is a teenager living in a trailer park who dreams of escaping his ordinary life. His favorite distraction is an arcade game called Starfighter. One night, Alex achieves an incredible high score. Then the game's creator arrives. Except he is not really a game designer. He is an alien recruiter, and the arcade machine was secretly designed to identify people capable of becoming actual space pilots. Within hours, Alex goes from frustrated teenager to potential defender of an interstellar alliance. That basic journey obviously exists in the shadow of Luke Skywalker. Ordinary young man, unimportant home, sudden call to adventure, space conflict, strange alien mentor, powerful enemy fleet. Yet the last starfighter finds an idea that is completely its own. What if playing video games actually prepared you to save the galaxy? For 1984 audiences, that was irresistible. The film also became notable for its extensive use of computer-generated imagery for spacecraft sequences, at a time when miniature photography still dominated big-screen science fiction. And then there is the Death Blossom. During the climactic battle, Alex and Navigator Grigg use the Gunstar's special weapons system, spinning the ship while firing in nearly every direction. It became the film's signature action moment. Unlike many movies on this countdown, The Last Starfighter did not merely recreate the surface of Star Wars. It understood the fantasy underneath it. A bored young person looks at the stars and wonders whether something bigger is waiting. Then, one day, something arrives and says yes. That is why this forgotten imitator eventually became a beloved cult classic in its own right. Number 2. Battle Beyond the Stars, 1980. Roger Corman did not hide what audiences wanted. He simply gave them the cheapest, respectable version he could build. After Star Wars exploded, Corman produced Battle Beyond the Stars, a $2 million space opera built around a very old story. The peaceful planet Akir is threatened by the ruthless Sador. Unable to defeat his forces alone, young Shad leaves home aboard a talking spacecraft and begins traveling across the galaxy to recruit warriors who might defend his people. So yes, there is a young hero leaving a quiet planet. There are eccentric space companions. There is an evil ruler. There are laser battles. There are bizarre aliens. And there is James Horner, composing a score big enough to make the production feel far more expensive than it actually was. But the real foundation is Seven Samurai and its Western remake The Magnificent Seven. Shad gathers a mismatched group including Gelt, played by Robert Vaughn, cowboy-like adventurer Cowboy, the warrior Santex Min, and several stranger allies. Each agrees to fight Sador for a different reason. The movie then builds toward the enormous space battle promised by its title. For a Corman production, the effects are remarkably ambitious. There is a reason. A young filmmaker named James Cameron worked on the production's special effects and art direction, years before becoming one of Hollywood's biggest directors. The final battle gives audiences everything the poster promised: miniature ships, laser fire, explosions, desperate pilots, heroic sacrifices, and one giant evil flagship. Was Corman chasing Star Wars money? Of course. Contemporary and later commentary has repeatedly described the film as one of the clearest cash-ins from that wave. But here is the controversial part. Battle Beyond the Stars is actually fun. It knows exactly what kind of movie it is. Number 1. The Man Who Saves the World, 1982. Nothing else could possibly be number 1, because most filmmakers copied Star Wars. This movie actually put Star Wars inside itself. The Turkish science fantasy adventure Dünyayı Kurtaran Adam, usually known internationally as The Man Who Saves the World, or simply Turkish Star Wars, stars Cüneyt Arkın as Murat, a heroic pilot who crashes onto a strange world with his companion Ali. From there, the pair encounter monsters, an evil ruler, mystical powers, strange civilizations, martial arts battles, and an almost unstoppable amount of cinematic chaos. But the opening space battle is what made the film infamous. Instead of creating convincing original spacecraft sequences, the movie incorporates unauthorized footage associated with Star Wars, placing its actors against material that audiences already recognized. It also borrowed music and sound elements from other well-known films. The result has to be seen to be believed. Murat appears inside a cockpit while familiar space battle imagery races behind him. Nothing quite matches. Scale changes. Editing becomes frantic. And yet the movie keeps moving as though viewers will simply accept everything. Once the heroes reach the planet, things become even stranger. Murat battles brightly costumed creatures with martial arts. He performs impossible jumps. He trains his body against rocks. Ancient history, lost civilizations, mystical objects, futuristic technology, and space warfare are blended together with almost no concern for genre boundaries. Eventually, Marat gains extraordinary power and confronts the evil ruler directly. Calling this simply a Star Wars ripoff almost feels inadequate. It is Star Wars, martial arts cinema, superhero fantasy, mythology, adventure serials, and Turkish popular filmmaking thrown into one enormous cinematic blender. And unlike polished Hollywood imitations, it feels completely unpredictable. You never know what image is coming next. You never know what piece of music you might hear. You never know whether the next opponent will be a futuristic warrior or something that looks like it escaped from a children's television show. That is exactly why it survived. Not because it successfully copied Star Wars, but because it failed to copy it in the most unforgettable way possible. So, which forgotten Star Wars copy deserves another chance? And which one should remain buried in the VHS vault forever? From recycled spaceships to medieval aliens and the unbelievable madness of Turkish Star Wars, the 1980s proved that no blockbuster was safe from imitation. If you enjoyed this trip through the cheaper side of the galaxy, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us which forgotten 80s sci-fi movie we should cover next.